Hello, it's your boy Horror Studio One. If you guys watched yesterday's video, today is the two-part series of the rain videos. No, I'm kidding. But basically, where I live in Hong Kong, we had a crazy-ass typhoon. Buildings were falling down, people were getting hurt and stuff. But fortunately, right now, weather's doing fine. But still, I recorded this video yesterday, so it might still have some rain sounds. I just want to put that disclaimer out, and I want to apologize for that. But anyways, guys, enjoy the video. The videos after will have no more rain sounds, but I try my best, bro. Just try my best.
Public transportation romance. This story happened quite a few years ago when I was much younger and much more naive. I want to preface this story by stating that I have learned my lesson. I am now in a happy and long-term relationship that has taught me a lot about my self-worth. Also, I apologize for the length of any unnecessary details. It's been a long time since I've let myself think about it, and it was quite cathartic to write this out here. This started my second year of university. I am a female and overweight. I was very focused on my studies while in high school, so even though I had a large group of friends and went to parties, I always put school first. I didn't date because I saw it as a distraction, and to be completely honest with myself, no one really was interested in me. Most of my male friends were gay and the straight ones were already dating all my other friends. It wasn't until university that I decided maybe it was time for me to open myself up to the concept that I could start dating and share my time with someone. So, about a week before school started, I was heading to our local mall to hang out with some friends and buy some new clothes for the year. At this time, I had a license, but I did not possess a car, so the only means of transportation available to me were walking, friends that took pity on me, and the bus. Unfortunately, today, I was at the mercy of public transportation. I was already on my connecting bus heading to the mall when I watched as a young guy walked onto the bus. He looked to be a few years older than myself and was in quite good shape. As this was the bus heading to the mall, the route was quite busy, and my seat was the last seat open. He proceeded to sit next to me. I don't pay him much attention, as I was texting my friend. When I finished texting, I did everything I could to not engage with the guy beside me. My phone was an older phone that had a slide-out keyboard, but no internet access or games. Like I said, this happened a while ago. I was able to avoid his stare for about 10 minutes more until he shifted his weight and I made accidental eye contact with him. It was at this point that he smiled at me and said that I looked quite beautiful. He commented on how pale my skin was and how pretty it looked contrasting against my dress. I smiled uncomfortably, but began talking to him. It was nice to be acknowledged, but I was still wary. I gave him a fake name, Olivia, and we continued conversing. When the bus stopped at the mall, he asked me what my number was, but I told him I didn't know him that well, and that I would see him around. I spent the whole day with my friends, and then it was time to head home. My mother had already arranged to pick me up at the plaza, closer to our house, but I still need to take the bus to this location. As I'm settling down for the ride back, I see the guy coming on the bus. I hate to admit that I was a bit happy to see him on the bus, and when he sat down beside me, I was flattered. We talked the whole ride, and when his stop came up, he asked for my phone number. This time I gave him my Facebook instead. He actually laughed when he realized I provided him a fake name and credited me with being smart about it. I am a naturally cautious person, and my Facebook didn't contain many personal details or even many pictures, as I used them mostly to connect with friends for group assignments or private chat, so I didn't feel as nervous about providing him that information. That night, he began messaging me, and for a few weeks we only chatted on Facebook. After a few weeks of chatting, I felt comfortable enough with him to give him my cell phone number and arrange a face-to-face meetup. To my excitement, the meetup goes well. We meet in a public coffee shop and pay our own ways. At the end of the date, we go our separate ways, and I actually look forward to seeing him again. We make plans to go on another date, but in about a week, life is a bit crazy around September, and I felt bad for putting off more time together, as he seemed to understand and gave me space. This next date he planned on his own to give me some time to deal with my personal life, and I thought that was so sweet of him. He wanted to pick me up, but I agreed to meet him at the movie theater instead. We still haven't known each other that long, and I don't want him knowing where I live. I am so thankful that I made this decision. Also, the theater was in a plaza not far from my house anyways. We went to see Paranormal Activity 2 in the theaters. I love scary movies so much, and I find them more funny than scary. The entire movie, I was laughing and having a grand old time, but now I would look at him, he didn't look so pleased. This put me on edge, but I tried to not worry about it, and chalked up to him not wanting to look scared in front of me when I'm clearly not afraid. When the movie ends, he proceeds to explain his plan, and why he was looking so sour. He was hoping I would get so scared that I would jump into his arms for protection, and he would be able to segue into more intimate activities. The dinner plans you're supposed to have afterwards weren't real, and he was hoping to take me home with him. I'm not okay with this plan, so I faked that my mom called me, and I have to go home immediately. He asked for a ride, as he actually walked over to the theater. I agree, and we get in my car, and I drive him to his house. I figured out that he didn't have a car at his disposal, and was originally going to pick me up in a friend's car. Also, he lived a 2-minute walk from the theater. I dropped him off at his house, and he goes in for a kiss. I try to turn my face, but he holds it in place. When he finished kissing me, he is talking about how much he loves me, and is looking forward to spending all his time with me. I am floored and disgusted with the situation, so I laugh nervously and say goodbye. Before I reverse out of his driveway, he tries to open my driver's side door, but thankfully it is locked. My window is slightly rolled down, and he tried to push it down with his fingers. When I don't relent, he proceeds to kiss my window, and then lets me leave. I am officially creeped out, and I want to go home as fast as I can. For the first few days after the date, I felt very uncomfortable with the whole situation. He was texting me non-stop, and his texts were getting progressively creepier. The texts would range from, I love you, to I can't wait to marry you. Our babies are gonna be the most beautiful babies in the world. It had only been about a month, and he was already talking about babies? I showed a friend the text and explained the whole situation. She gave me a huge hug and told me her own story. She suggested that if I was really done with him, that I could break up with him, and just because he made the first move, I wasn't a prude or tease for ending it. I didn't owe him anything. I felt so much lighter after talking to her that I messaged him right away and broke things off. I went to class thinking it was just gonna be that easy, but it wasn't. He proceeded to flood my phone with text messages. At first they were concerned. He wondered where we went wrong, and what he did to scare me off. When I didn't respond instantaneously, he changed tactics and began saying he was going to kill himself, and that I was his soulmate. At this point, I was out of class and able to address his text. I called him and explained that I didn't feel a connection, that it was better for me to end it early, and I didn't really want to lead him on. I also told him that it was not worth killing yourself over, and that if he was feeling that way, he needed to speak to someone about it. This stirred a new barrage of texts and voicemails, calling me various terrible names and blaming me for leading him on. He said that it was my fault he was going to kill himself, and that I was a horrible person. He called my phone constantly, causing me to flat out turn off my phone. This is the point at which I told my mother. She didn't judge me for not telling her earlier, and she was supportive that I tried to handle it on my own, but she was angry he was acting this erratic. She was a bit nervous at his escalation, especially as she works in criminal law and sees the worst of humanity on a daily basis. I followed her advice and texted him that I am not responsible for his choices or behaviors, that I stand by my decision to break up with him, that I do not condone the way he is speaking to me, that I wouldn't respond anymore, than that if he persists, I will be forced to contact the police. The last part only made things worse, and he continued to send me messages about self-harm. When I stopped responding, he started threatening me and my family. He threatened that he would find me and kill me and then hang himself. I immediately removed him off Facebook and warned all of my friends not to give up my personal information to anyone. I was comforted knowing he had no idea where I lived, but I frequented that plaza often with my family. I was scared he would see me one day and follow me home. The scary thing was, I lived only 5 minutes away from him, so it was feasible that he could randomly spot me anywhere in our neighborhood. I became a recluse, and the text messages continued. They were getting more and more aggressive. At first, he was threatening to kill me, but then began attacking my family. When he threatened to kill my sister, I lost it. I had enough, and was ready to stand up for myself. I called him and waited. He picked up the phone and tried to act all sweet. I didn't give him any chance to try and smooth things over with me. I told him that threatening me was one thing, but coming after my family was another. I told him he was a horrible person and absolute filth. I did say a few things I'm not proud of, but in the moment they made sense to say. I told him it was over and that I was done with his bullshit. One more attempt at contact and I was going straight to the cops. I reminded him that I knew where he lived and that it would be easy to find him. I like to think that it was the last part that scared him, because he hung up on me and never contacted me again. For the next little while, I was very cautious about leaving my house, and my family avoided that plaza at all costs. I saved all the threatening text messages just in case, and kept my old phone even though when I upgraded to a new one. About a year and a half later, my friend decided to look him up on Facebook against my wishes. She discovered that he moved and I didn't need to worry about a chance meeting with him again. She also discovered that his new fiancée could have passed as my twin. It was unsettling to know that she was almost identical to me, and he had started dating her not long after I told him to finally leave me alone. To the guy that professed his love to me, and then threatened to kill himself and me, please, let us never meet again. The night the dogs escaped. By the time you're done reading, you might think it's a misleading title, but it really was just a standard night, and my dogs did really escape. Not terribly out of the ordinary when you have 3 Houdini hounds. It's what happened during the hunt for them that weirds me out. I was 16 at the time, I believe. It was the end of September. I was left home alone for the first prolonged time. 3 weeks whilst my mom and her fella and her BFF and husband went on a cruise to Mexico. I was not living teen life to the full, let me tell ya. I go to work in the bar she ran, and come home and play video games, watch TV, lord around online, typical 17-year-old girl stuff. I didn't have many friends, so I wasn't exactly hosting nightly shingdings. Nope, this was pure and simple me time. Except, I kinda have someone keeping an eye on me. An employee of my mom's who had become a family friend, Annie. We'd hang out, watch a movie, order food, that kind of thing. I went to hers a couple of times. She'd swing by after work. It was good. I felt like an adult, responsible, grown up, adulting all the way. Now, the 3 weeks had gone by pretty easily. Life was simple. And then, as luck would have it, on the final night before my mom flew home, the dogs somehow managed to wriggle their way out of the front door. It's 15 or so years ago now. I forget the finer details. And off they go, full speed ahead, 2 big dogs, 1 little dog, William Wallacing their way to freedom. Shit. This was all I needed, right? So I call Annie. It's getting late. It's dark out. And I know exactly where they're heading, but I'll be damned if I were walking there alone. Annie says she'll pick me up and drive me down, and we'll shout the dogs together. I grew up in a smallish estate, with a multitude of little cul-de-sacs and a kind of loop. At one side was the motorway, but the other side, about a 20-minute walk, was a country park called Curtin Valley. The kind of place that was beautiful to wander around on a summer day, with a river that cut through the center, and a huge lake to greet you when you walked in from our side. It was a gorgeous place. I'd taken the dogs to many times, but at nighttime, whole other story. That place was a murderer's dream. There were hills and dips and woodland, and if you dumped a body in the water, I'm pretty sure it'd not have surfaced for a long time. No way was I trotting around there on my own, but those damn dogs sure would. By the time Annie arrived, they'd have been gadding around the fields and jumping in the river, and Lord knows what else. But it was a fair walk to the lake from any of the 4 entrances, so Annie picked the back car park and headed there. We pulled into the car park, and there was a car there, nothing too unexpected. It was secluded enough for a good make-out section or illicit affair. The car looked empty. Annie parked, we got out. I shouted at the dogs a few times, listened intently, but nothing. Not a peep. So I get back in and we decided to go to the next car park along. Not thinking of the dogs came running. I'd not be there. It was late. We were tired. As we were about to pull out of the car park, the parked car inside flashes their headlights with some urgency. Annie stops dead, checks her lights, looks at me in silence. I ask if she thinks they need help. She responds that the car looked empty. I eased the tension with jokes about dogging and the guy probably having his seat reclined to give his girlfriend a better angle. Annie decides to circle back once more. We crawl past the car. It didn't have blacked out windows, and it wasn't much of a boy racer car. You couldn't see inside because of the dark, but as we turned the corner towards the exit again, her brake lights on the driver window let us pick out the shape of a man, sat bolt upright, looking ahead. Not looking at us, just staring right ahead. I exclaimed that there was a person, and both of us got getting rattled. She made to set off out of there. And then the headlights started flashing again. We weren't stupid enough to go back in there as 2 young women. We'd seen him, so he'd surely seen us. We were heading along the main road now, and still his lights were flashing away as I glanced back. Maybe he really did need help. Maybe he was suicidal. Maybe he could see the dogs and was signaling us back. We were torn, but too apprehensive to put ourselves into danger. The flashing disappeared when we crested a hill on the main road, and Annie pulled in to the side and called the police. She explained that this person kept flashing their light, and maybe someone should go and check on them just to see if they were in any sort of danger. The operator was dubious about the behavior and said they'd sent a patrol car and that we should go home. We both sat there for a long while, weighing up the options of lost dogs and creepy car guy. It was at that moment that the car tore past us, easily clocking 60 miles per hour, and we're maybe 600 yards away from the entrance, so he must have absolutely floored it. The car wobbled. He shot by that fast. It was like he knew we called the police, and Annie, in her infinite wisdom, decided to try and follow him. She reasoned it was to see if the police were on their way, but I think she was just curious. We drove on into a small township, one long road right through with 0 traffic at this hour, and decided that maybe we should wait at the car park for the police and explain. Annie, understandably, didn't want the trouble of a suspected hoax call, so we doubled back and set off towards the car park, maybe 2 minutes away. And then that goddamn car came towards us, flashing wildly again. From the direction we come from, there was no way he passed us the opposite way because nobody had, and to get back to the starting point, he'd have to go one of the 2 ways for at least 10 minutes just to loop us like that. How the hell did he end up behind us? And how did he know which direction we'd taken at the lights? Many questions were unspoken but almost deafening in the car. We paused at the main lights, left for home, right for Preston, straight ahead to drive alongside the park, straight on she went. The only words we exchanged were what the fuck and I don't know. And then the car was coming towards us again, from up near the car park, flashing wildly, and right by us he sped. And he swung the car in the middle of the road and set after him. I remember a high-pitched, "What are you doing?" wheezing out of me, and I genuinely don't know if she knew, but he'd sparked some kind of vendetta in her. We lost him instantly, though, and it was then that the patrol car came towards us, heading towards a car park we started in, and so Annie once again turned the car around and headed to the car park, too. She wanted to talk to a policeman. Neither of us felt good about the creepy car guy who was tailing us. Neither of us knew how to explain it either, but we could try. As we neared the car park entrance, the police car was just idling, waiting to pull out. "Oh my god," Annie whispered, and I looked over to see her ashen face looking in the mirror. He was behind us, flashing his high beams. Common sense would have dictated us. We pulled into the car park, but both of us were freaking out, and in the back of my mind, I still had the dogs to find, and she just carried on right by the police car without taking her eyes off of the rearview mirror for more than a couple seconds at a time. The car followed, and after a second or two, I watched in the mirror as the police car pulled out to follow us too. Now the road we were on is pretty long, and there were several sets of lights with crossroads. Annie was tense, I was tense, and all I could say was, "Don't let him follow us home." Annie nodded. "We'll drive until he's gone. He won't do anything with the police behind him." And Annie played it cool. All the lights stayed green, meaning we couldn't shake him. So Annie tried taking turns without signaling, but still, the convoy followed. Close to Clory, her hometown, she signaled a turn, and as she took it, the creepy guy floored it, shooting off straight ahead, and the police car put the blues on and sped after him. Shaken, Annie stopped for a few minutes at the side of the road. Again, the same two phrases passed between us: "What the fuck" and "I don't know." Eventually, when we saw no other cars, we headed back to my house, and as we pulled up, all three dogs were sitting there, all happy, waggy tails, so glad we were back. I never resented them so much in my life, the little shits. But we got inside, got a cup of tea to calm our nerves, and sat down, recounting the episode. It was creepier than I can do justice, but needless to say, we were freaked out by how he kept appearing ahead of us, coming towards us. What would have happened if we got out of the car again? We still talk about it occasionally when we get together and want to spook each other. My mom got home the next day. The dogs got out on more adventures in the following years, but never with creepy car guy around. It was certainly an experience, if a freaky one. "I'm gonna cut your throat." Then Mark Ruffalo appears. This is my favorite subreddit, and for the longest time, I was like, man, I wish I had a story. But not really though, all these stories are fucking terrifying. And then I stupidly realized, hey, you're a girl? Of course you have stories. I haven't had anything bad happen to me recently. But there's something that happened a few years ago. This was back in 2014, and I was 19 years old and living in Toronto, going to university. I was studying in university in Toronto under the guise of really wanting to be an actor. If you're in Canada and want to act, you gotta go to Toronto. So I spent all of my time in school doing my English and psychology degree and going to auditions and acting. One time, my friend asked me to film a short film with her downtown. I was super excited because her dad was a professional filmmaker and she wanted to direct her own short film with her script. She's a wannabe actor too. Now, the thing about Toronto, if you don't know, is it's sketchy. I'm sorry if you're from Toronto and you're offended, but it's true. I've lived in London and New York, and I was infinitely more scared walking around Toronto alone at night than I've ever been in New York or London. I'm never gonna move back anyways. It was the afternoon when this happened, and I was downtown in my area of the city I hadn't been yet. I was using my phone trying to find where my friend and her dad were. I had to pee, so I slip into a bar and come out and start walking. Even though I was downtown, there was no one on the street. I walk for 2 minutes down the road, and then I see this sketchy looking guy walking erratically in a circle and mumbling to himself, clearly a drug addict needing a fix. He was a tall, darker skinned man, skinny, ragged clothes. He was completely wigging out. Let me tell you, he looked really, really rough. And I'm a white girl. This will be relevant in a second. Fuck, I think to myself. I'm alone, and I need to pass this guy to where I'm going to. So I plan to just walk really fast past him and ignore him. You pass by characters like this in the city all the time. He should just ignore me as well, as he's clearly in his own little world, right? As I'm approaching him, and almost beside him on the sidewalk, he looks at me. I don't look at him, but I see from my peripheral he's looking at me. He starts saying things I don't understand, and I try to ignore. Then he says what to this day is the single most terrifying thing anyone has ever said to me. After his unintelligible muttering, he says very clearly, "Fuck you, white cunt. I'm going to cut your fucking throat." I look at him for a split second in shock of what he just said to me, completely unprovoked. Hey, I was just walking by. I give him a quick once over and see that he has what I believe to be a knife he's hiding in his tattered sleeve, and I meet his eyes and he says, "Yeah, you." Mind you, this all happened in 1 second, me realizing what he said and that he had a knife, and I immediately take off running. I zigzag through streets to lose him. I think he followed me for a bit, but honestly, I don't look back after that. I think he gave a half-hearted try based on sounds I heard behind me, but I just kept running for a little while. I get far enough from the scene and catch someone leaving a lobby of an apartment block, and I go in there and just sit beside the couch and have a little cry. But then, being the highly professional actress extraordinaire I am, after my little cry, I plug in the route or where I need to be to shoot my friend's short film when I venture out again. I find her without further incident, and I tell her what happened, and she said, "Oh, that's so weird," and that's the end of it. Not sympathetic at all, just wanting to get her film done. And so, like the talented actor I am, I suck it up and shot the short film for the next few hours, completely shaken up inside from the encounter, and trying to keep myself together. Then I swear to God, after I was done shooting, flustered from my experience, I was trying to find my way back to my car, as I can't find my car, and now it's getting dark, and I'm almost crying from all the stress that just happened. Then I see Mark Ruffalo looking at me concerned from the back of a black car. I shit you not. This happened in September, which is TIFF time, a time where all the Hollywood descends on Toronto for a few weeks for the film festival. So I had seen a few other celebrities around. Anyways, me and Mark Ruffalo make eye contact, and I'm just so confused. I just had to run for my life. Then Mark Ruffalo is there. He seemed genuinely worried about me. I love Mark Ruffalo and wish I would have said hi and ran out to his car and gotten a photo or something, but I was just too overwhelmed. So I gave him a half-hearted smile and kept walking and eventually found my car. What a crazy, weird day. Terrifying asshole drug addict. Let's never meet again. Mark Ruffalo. Let's meet under better circumstances. Edit. When I finally got home, I walked through the door to my townhouse, and my roommate asked what was wrong, and I immediately burst out crying. She encouraged me to report it, so I phoned the non-emergency line at Toronto Police, and I had to come in and give a statement, but nothing ever came of it. Who knew a dent would lead to this? I'm new here, but I just had to share this story. To give a little subtext, I'm a mid-20s female, about 5'2", and I drive a convertible. Trust me, this is important. This happened recently, and ever since I've been on high alert. Now, I work your typical 9-to-5 office job for a large moving company, but from time to time, I have to work our late shift, which is from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., and this happened just as it was starting to get dark, around 5 p.m., and so late September, early October-ish? Somewhere in there. Anyways, I was working on these late shifts. To give little more subtext, I'm normally working our site location about 10 minutes from where I live, but when working late shift, I have to go to our main office, a good 45-minute commute over 3 freeways. So to say the least, at the end of a late shift, I'm beyond ready to be home, and know I have a good little drive ahead of me. I smoke, so I have my driver's side window down, so I can let the smoke out as I drive and enjoy some fresh air. When I'm driving on the freeway, I have my music up, but as I'm approaching my exit, finally, I turn it down just to listen, in case of sirens and whatnot. So, I'm sitting at the red light now, about a block and a half from home, when a car pulls up alongside me, and I hear a, "Hey!" I don't really pay attention, but I hear another, "Hey, I see your car has a dent." See, told you the car would play into this. And yes, it's true. Above my driver's seat tire is a dent, small and can easily be popped out, but I just never had. So I turn my head and see a four-door car, like a Toyota Camry, to give an idea what y'all guys in the car in front and back windows down on my side. "I can fix that dent. I have the tools on me if you want to follow me." I yell, "No thank you." And luckily, the light turns green, and I punch it. I just want to get home. When I look back in my mirror, those fuckers change lanes and are following me at this point. I'm freaking out. I'm alone, and the last thing I want to do is lead them to my house. I'm going a good 10 to 15 miles over the speed limit, which is 45, and I drive right past my street and go down a side street a few blocks up that lead to a road that runs along train tracks. On this road are a lot of storage warehouses, and when I don't see them directly behind me coming around a turn, then haul it into one of the warehouse entrance and cut my car off so no lights were on and sit there watching my rearview mirror. I'm shaking at this point, and when I see headlights I hold my breath for what feels like forever before they pass by. I sat there a while longer and lit up another smoke because at this point my nerves are shot. After a few minutes, I leave and as quickly as I can make it home and hug my kids tight. I've never been approached like that since, but now I keep a clear eye out and will roll my window up after I smoke. Silent man at work. So this is nowhere near as creepy as some of the other posts, but this happened to me a couple weeks ago, and it was creepy nonetheless. My office is located on the top floor of a plaza. It's not overtly busy, and I usually see the same faces passing through each day. The door from the plaza to our office is just a metal frame with a single pane of glass. Looking through it, you just see a corridor with a swinging wooden door at the end. Nothing to see other than the two walls, the floor and the door. It has a passcode lock for security. So, one afternoon, I go downstairs and step outside the office for a smoke. As I'm coming out onto the street, there's a middle-aged man walking up the plaza. As I come out, he stops and stares at me. Some of the familiar faces I see are slightly odd people passing through to the bus station, so I pass, no remarks, and light up my smoke. He starts walking towards me. This guy doesn't look too odd. Brown shoes, tan pants, shirt, and a jacket. He looks like a grandfather type, so I wasn't sure what was really going on here. He's still looking at me as he approaches, and I'm not really sure how to react. Maybe he just needs directions or something? Then he walks by and moves towards the door. He then stands right up against the door, nose about a half inch from touching the glass. He's just staring through the glass. There are no signs or notices on the glass, just a clear view of the corridor. I get back to my smoke. A couple minutes passed and I'm finishing my smoke. The guy is still there, just staring. I finish my smoke and the guy is standing right against the door, blocking the keypad. I need to get back up to the office, so I say, "Hey, sorry, can I just get to the door, please?" Silent staring. "Excuse me, I need to get to the door." "Are you alright, sir?" "I just need 2 seconds to get back in, please." Nothing. I give up trying to ask him and decide to just wait it out. After about 5 minutes or so, he turns his head and looks me dead in the eye. After about 10 to 15 seconds, he just turns and walks away. He wasn't really menacing towards me, just creepy. I made sure the catch clicked into place when the door swung shut behind me. I've seen him a few times since then, walking through the plaza. Anytime he sees me, he slows his pace and looks straight at me until he's passed by. Creepy path. This happened in September on my way to work. A bit of background. I work at a mall that's actually rather close to my house. It's probably a 3 to 5 minute walk away. I've been walking to the mall by myself since I was a kid, and I've never had any problems, although there has been events over the last year on my path. There is a point on the way that's pretty creepy. There's a house to one side and a very high wall that you cannot climb over on the other side. Needless to say, it is a freaky spot. Before my incident, 2 women were raped there by a kid about my age, 18 to 20 years old. But the women were in their late 40s, and they caught the kid. So while I was nervous, I never thought something would happen to me. So, it's late September of this year, and I'm walking to work. We don't have a uniform, but we were supposed to look put together. I was wearing a skirt and a rather low-cut top. But in my bag I had an undershirt I planned to put on once I got to the mall area, and I was listening to music through my earbuds at the moment. I started to approach the creepy area of the path when somebody stepped on my heels. He was following me so closely that he was stepping on the back of my sandals. I turned around to see a very tall man, maybe in his late 60s, just staring at me. He looked like an average guy, clean black hair and stubble, and his stare looked angry. I assumed I was in his way, so I said an apology, expecting him to sidestep around me. He didn't. So I turned around and kept walking. But I made sure I didn't listen to my music. My earbuds were still in. This man started to talk to my back, as if he thought my music was still playing. He was saying very lewd things about his plans for me, my juicy ass, and some other very explicit content that still makes me shiver to this day. He started to get close to me again, so I faked a call from my boss. I ran to the intersection I needed to cross, which led right into the parking lot of the mall, but there were so many cars I couldn't cross. I looked over and the man is shoulder to shoulder with me. It's about noon in broad daylight, and this man grabs my arm. I yanked my arm away and bolted across the oncoming traffic, screaming for my life. Another pedestrian came running up to me. He asked me what was wrong, crying. I explained I didn't know the man, who was now following me across traffic, calling me Jen, which is not even my fucking name, and telling me to get back here, and that I was worrying him? The pedestrian helped me quickly escorted into the parking lot of the mall. The man was still chasing me, doing this limp-like run after me. He's dropped the name, and now he's just telling me to come back. I ran to the store I worked for and hid in the backroom area for the longest time. My boss called security because the man told her about coming in and kept asking me to come back to the car. He ran off later after security chased him, but they never caught him. I talked to the police and they even ran the story on the evening news to try to catch the guy. But it's the end of February now, and they still haven't got him. I don't listen to music on my walks to work anymore. Sometimes coworkers will either drive me home or at least wait with me until I do get a ride from someone I know. I'm terrified to be alone in a parking lot now, so to the creepy guy calling me Jen, let's never, ever meet again. He found me again. English is my third language, so keep that in mind when snickering at my less than perfect grammar. When I was 20 years old, it was really hard to find work in my hometown. I eventually married to get a job, though, as an administrator. I don't know what this sort of place is called in English, but I'll describe it to you. People who commit very serious crimes, usually arson, murder, or similar, who are believed to suffer from mental issues or personality disorders, are placed there instead of a normal prison. You know what kind of place I'm speaking of, yeah. That's where I worked. I'm a rather petite woman, just over 50 kg, and looking years younger than my actual age. Easy target, you might say. I rarely interacted with the interns, apart from being the one to let them in and out of the gate when they had reasons to be outside the facility, and then always escorted by the guards. There was one man, a short and broad dude from the Philippines, who always looked at me with the creepiest smile you ever saw, eyeing my ID badge closely every single time. I of course had no right to know what those people had done to end up in this place, but my boss felt the need to tell me about this specific guy. Watch out for him, she said. He's a serial killer and arsonist. Never let your guard down. People think he's stupid, but he's not. He's actually over average intelligence. The summer turned into fall, and in September of that year, I left my job to go to university. It wasn't 2 years later in December, just before Christmas, that it happened. I was shopping for a bracelet for my sister when I heard a whisper right next to my ear. "Hello, Josephine." I turn around and find myself eye to eye with the stalker arsonist guy. He had remembered my name, too. I didn't buy the bracelet. I left in a hurry, certain that he had not only been out on one of the short visits outside, and that the guards were close by watching. To let the interns train for being let out again. They give them freedom under a watchful eye, 1 hour per week or so, to see how they handle it. I didn't see any guards that I recognized, but I was sure they were there. I went home. My sister and I have on flat each of the top floor of an apartment building, and when we are both home, we keep our doors open and kids and pets can roam freely between our homes. We were in my flat decorating the Christmas tree when I heard the steps. Not the light steps of my niece, not the fast steps of my fiancé. It was the heavy, slow, determined steps of the arsonist. He had found me, and he was on his way up. I threw myself at the door, locking it shut. My sister had no idea what was going on, but I told her to take the kids, go into the bathroom, lock the door, call the cops. I stood by the locked front door, listening to the step. I could hear him roll around in my sister's apartment. He had found her Christmas cards and was reading the names of her children out loud. Then he started searching for something, while whistling happily to himself. My sister, always a rock, was keeping the kids calm in the bathroom while I was listening to him merrily explaining that he needed tools that could break the lock open. Since I knew who he was and police knew who he was, they arrived very quickly and soon the situation was resolved. It turned out that since there are too many places to keep those people, some have been let out early to make room for those considered more dangerous. I guess he found me by chance that day in the store and decided there and then to go after me. It was a frightening experience, and if my boss hadn't warned me so vigorously about this man, I wouldn't have acted as fast as I did. Stalker in the Mask. When I was 17 years old, I moved to college 2 hours away from home and took residence in the dorms on campus. The dorms were not run through the school, but through a management company. There were a lot of safety problems in the dorms as a result of this. Assaults, ODs, drugs, shootings right outside, etc. I am a 100-pound female, so I always watched out for serious situations around me. Everything was great. I had some awful roommates, but I was mostly left alone. One day in September, I think it was the end of September, I was leaving for class early in the morning when I spotted a condom taped to my name tag on the door. It had a note that said, "Call me, XOXO," with some random phone number. I told the RAs and nothing came of it. I just thought it was some random prank pulled by one of the guys on the floor. Things went south with my roommates, mostly because of my night terrors scaring them, even though I warned them before, and we agreed to be roommates, even after knowing I had these. So, I was moved into a 2-bedroom dorm with my new roommate, Jay. We each had our own rooms. After a week of living there, I started noticing that things were appearing in the living room while we were sleeping. I asked Jay about it, and she vehemently denied that it was her. One day we noticed that the lock on the front door did not lock properly. If you pulled on the lock and twisted the handle at the same time, the door would come open. Around the same time, I started getting Snapchats of inappropriate things, vague threats and offers for great sex. I would get ones that would say things like, "You look great today," with that specific article of clothing I was wearing. I filed a report to the dorms to get the locks fixed, but it took 4 months, 8 complaints, threats of legal action, and my friend D yelling at them to get any action at all. We got our door fixed, but the present still appeared outside of the door with notes for me. I was still receiving Snapchats, but I moved out of the dorms into an apartment with my then boyfriend. The Snapchats continued. Then I started getting calls at my work as well. I worked for the dean's office at my college, and I was in charge of answering phones. Every day, I would get 3 or more calls from randomly generated numbers. Discovered it was through apps like Viber and Skype. After I reported to police and they investigated, I would answer the calls. CLAS Dean's office. This is, how may I help you? I would hear heavy breathing for a few seconds. Then they would hang up. I thought it was just some 12-year-old pranking her office until my coworker got a call. She answered with her name, and the person on the line asked if they could speak with me. Thinking it was one of the deans that I've been working with, she forwarded it to my phone. I answered it, and I received the same heavy breathing and hang up. I reported it to my boss. She did nothing. One of the deans overheard the conversation and reported it to Title IX. Oh boy, talking to them was a huge, huge mistake. After the meeting with them, the threats started getting worse, and this person found me in my new apartment. One day in December, I was dog sitting 2 wonderful dogs who actually hated other dogs and would bark at them on sight. It was around 11 p.m. at night, and I decided to take them out before bed. We get outside. To the right of me is a bunch of thick trees that are hard to see through. I start to take the girls to the grass on the left. They start growling and barking at something in the trees, thinking it's another dog. I tried to pull them away, but they would not budge at all. I glance over, and out of the trees comes a tall man. But the weird thing is that he's wearing a Michael Myers-like mask. He starts rushing towards me. The dogs get in between me and him. He stops. I run up the stairs behind me into the apartment as he is disappearing into the trees again. Stupidly, I don't call the police, but I see him one more time before I move to my new apartment. Things are quiet for a while. My boyfriend and I eventually break up, and I spend the first few days in the new apartment alone. Come to find out the window that can be accessed from the ground doesn't even lock. One morning I wake up though, and everything seems normal. I check the mirror to do my hair for work. I have a bald spot. My head was shaved in the middle of the night. I found my hair tied up in knots in an envelope. I immediately call the police. They do an investigation. Find the window was broken, but can't find anything to figure out who it was that came into my apartment. They asked me to compile a list of everything that was missing, and the only thing gone other than my hair was 3 pairs of dirty underwear. I have photos of the hair and bald spot if anyone is interested. An investigation finds no one. I have since moved. I no longer answer phones at my work, and I keep bear spray next to my bed at all times. Light 'em up. First of all, I wanted to say that I'm Lithuanian, so my grammar will not be perfect by any means. So this happened like 4 years back. I am 19 years old now, soon to be 20, but I still get chills whenever I think about what happened that particular day. I live in a medium-sized city, which about 70 to 80,000 people live, and at the time I was living in almost city center. I took about 3 to 5 minutes to walk to the main part of our city, where every weekend a lot of people come to take a walk, just chill or to drink. Every September, our city holds a festival to name the birth of the city, and it usually takes place all weekend long, and you can already tell that a lot of people, especially teens, come and spend their evenings drinking and just ruining the atmosphere of the whole festival. At the time, I was 15 to 16 years old, and that was my first time going to a huge concert with my friends, not with my parents anymore. I was so pumped. Like, I felt almost a grown-up person. Parents told me to get home before midnight. Of course, that was never gonna happen, because the fireworks were scheduled at 12. My friends were not the ones usually talking nicely and chatting to random people. They were rude, disrespectful, and always kind of searching for problems, to be honest. Well, with that being said, there is no surprise. We found exactly what we were looking for. After the fireworks came to an end, we decided to go home. We all live in the same block, so we were all chatting and going home. We were walking and chatting random things, when suddenly we realized one friend of ours who were with us all the time was missing. We decided to call him, and he replied. It was dead silent in the background, and the voice from the phone told us, "I'm at home, getting ready to sleep. Catch you tomorrow." I wasn't the one talking to him, my other friend was. But when he heard those words, his face turned red really fast. He recognized that the voice from the phone that he had just heard was not the voice of our friend. Maybe he was lying and he stayed up at the concert, but first of all, there was no point for him to do that. And second, as I told before, the background was dead silent. It could not have been a concert. We decided to go to his apartment and tell his parents what had just happened. So we walked towards the house he lives in, and we started to hear some guys talking really silently, like whispering. I can taste you trying to light up a lighter. Just as we crossed the side of the house, we see like 6 or 7 guys holding our friend, mouth all taped up and on his knees, trying to light his jacket. We start to shout at them from some distance, so the people living around can see what's happening, until one of the guys pulls out a knife and starts running towards us. We all start to run as fast as we could in different directions, and that must have been the biggest mistake we made that night. He was going right after me, and I felt that he was gaining on me really fast. I knew that if he catches me, nothing good is going to happen. So I tried to run to some place where I can run into some other people. Suddenly, I felt a hand pulling my jacket, and I fell down really hard. My hands were bleeding, but I did not feel that at the moment. And I was on my back, looking right in his eyes, and he said something like, "So, boy from my home address, want to say your goodbyes?" And after he said that, my friend, the one we found missing, slammed him to the back with a huge metal pipe. The guy fell, quickly got to his feet, and ran away. Without any words coming from our mouths, we looked with our friend to each other and ran separate ways to our homes. I know it might have been a really bad idea, but that was just from pure instincts. Next day, I met with my friends in a yard where we used to play basketball and talked about everything that happened last night. As it appears, my friend, who was surrounded by other guys, had his arms held behind his back with his pockets full of a quite powerful explosive, which were being used the New Year's Eve. So the guy we faced was trying to ignite it, and the others held him so he couldn't move and take them out of his pockets. It might have been the thing to forget after those years, but the fact that I was looking in his eyes, and he told me my own home address with a demonic smile on his face every time, gives me the chills just trying to think about it. Luckily, nothing happened after that, and I sure as hell hope that we never meet again. Guys with explosives